World War II was an immense tragedy for the world, and someone had to be held accountable. There was no doubt the primary culprits were Germany. However, they were not the only ones to face consequences for their actions. Even before the war ended, various European countries began dealing with collaborators, those who had cooperated with the occupying forces. As the German army retreated, and before the Allied governments could fully establish control, hatred towards those who had aided the Germans surged within local societies. This led to an intense and often brutal cycle of retribution. In France alone, around 10,000 people who had supported the Germans were killed. The desire for revenge had already been present earlier. Approximately 3,000 French citizens were executed even before the Allied landings in Normandy on June 6, 1944. Similar events unfolded in Italy, particularly in the regions of Emilia-Romagna and Lombardy, where collaborators were treated with exceptional ruthlessness. In the final months of the war, about 15,000 people lost their lives. Elsewhere in Europe, the bloodshed was on a smaller scale. In Belgium, 265 people were executed, while in the Netherlands, the number was around 100. It wasn't just men who collaborated with the Germans who were targeted. Women faced severe repercussions as well. Those who survived often endured public humiliation. In the Netherlands, they were covered in tar and feathers. In France, on the very day of liberation in various towns, women accused of collaboration were stripped and had their heads shaved in public squares. But were they truly guilty? Some of these women had provided sexual services in exchange for food, clothing, or protection. Others were simply forced into such circumstances by the harsh realities of war. It is crucial to remember these nuances when judging their actions in retrospect. The number of people punished and the severity of penalties imposed after the war varied from country to country. In Norway, a nation of just 3 million people, all members of the pro-Nazi National Unity Party faced trial a total of 55,000 individuals. Of these, 17,000 were sentenced to prison. 30 death sentences were handed down, the vast majority of which were carried out. In the Netherlands, investigations into collaboration with Nazi Germany involved around 200,000 people, with half of them ending up in prison. Additionally, 17,000 civil servants lost their jobs, although this did not extend to professions like teachers or independent professionals. A total of 154 Dutch citizens were sentenced to death, with 40 executions carried out. In neighboring Belgium, the numbers were significantly higher. Nearly 3,000 death sentences were issued, though just over 240 were actually carried out. Unlike the Netherlands, where most convicted collaborators were quickly granted amnesty, many Belgian prisoners remained incarcerated for years. Those convicted never regained full civil rights. In France, collaboration had been widespread, largely due to the existence of the Vichy puppet government. As a result, punishments were relatively lenient. Notably, 3 out of the 4 judges handling collaboration trials had previously worked under the Vichy regime. Ultimately, fewer than 1 in 10 accused individuals were imprisoned. Less than 40,000 people. Most were released following a general amnesty in 1947. However, this does not mean there were no death sentences. Between 1944 and 1951, French courts sentenced over 6,000 people to death for treason and similar crimes, with nearly 800 executions carried out. The most common punishment for collaborators in France was the so-called national degradation. This penalty stripped individuals of certain civil rights, banning them from wearing military decorations, working as lawyers, notaries, teachers, or judges, and from owning or running a radio station or film studio. Convicted individuals were also barred from holding positions such as bank director. In total, nearly 50,000 French citizens faced this form of punishment. The situation in Italy was particularly intriguing. Paradoxically, the first anti-fascist government was largely composed of former fascists. The only fascist-related crime that could be prosecuted in court was collaboration with the enemy after September 1943, when northern Italy fell under German control. This period saw the creation of the Italian Social Republic, a puppet state with its government based in Salo on Lake Garda. One of the most astonishing aspects of post-war Italy was that imprisoned fascists were often judged by former fascist judges. In March 1946, the High Commission for Purging Fascists, tasked with cleansing Italy of its fascist past, was disbanded. Just 3 months later, the first amnesty was announced, prepared by the Communist Minister of Justice Palmiro Togliatti. As a result, nearly every mayor and mid-level official removed from office in 1944-1945 was reinstated to their former position. In the Balkans, Tito imposed his own brand of order. After an attack on a Catholic church, priests were imprisoned. Over the next 2 years, tens of thousands of anti-communists were executed. The Yugoslav authorities also executed and deported many ethnic Hungarians in retaliation for their alleged role in the January 1942 massacre in Vojvodina, carried out by the Hungarian army. In Czechoslovakia, special people's courts handed down over 700 death sentences, with an equal number of life sentences. Nearly 20,000 people received shorter prison terms. On April 18, 1947, Father Joseph Tiso was hanged for using the wartime chaos to establish a puppet state in Slovakia. In the Czech and Moravian regions, almost all death sentences were carried out, following a law requiring executions to take place within 2 hours of sentencing. The next episode, I'll discuss what happened in Austria and Germany. How were the war criminals punished? To find out, subscribe to World in Depth.